Good evening, this is The Last Word and I'm Maria Shakil. Tonight, what we are witnessing is not just a tariff hike, it's a punishment dressed up as policy. In a stunning move, Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, has announced a 50% tariff on Indian exports to the United States. And let's be clear, this isn't about trade imbalances or market access. This is retaliation, this is pressure, this is about Russia. Donald Trump has accused India of fueling the Russian war machine, quote unquote. A direct reference to India's decision to continue importing discounted Russian crude despite Western sanctions. And now that foreign policy choice has been met with what can only be described as an economic punishment. Let's try and unpack what's really happening here. India, like many developing economies, has prioritized energy security over Western geopolitical posturing. It has repeatedly made it clear we will buy oil where it is affordable. That oil has helped keep inflation under control, manage our current account, and insulate Indian economy from global shocks. But now Donald Trump's message is clear: choose the West or pay the price. This is a dangerous precedent. It's not just a challenge to India's economic interests, it's a challenge to our strategic autonomy. Can a sovereign nation then be punished for acting in its own interest, for not towing Washington's line? Let's also not forget that India has been a key partner in the Indo-Pacific, a cornerstone of the Quad, a counterbalance in Asia to China, and yet it is now facing a steep economic penalty for a sovereign energy decision. So who benefits from this? Not the Indian exporter, not the American consumer. But India right now has stood its ground before, like it has done, and with the latest announcement coming in today, will New Delhi respond? Yes, the response has also come in from New Delhi. The Ministry of External Affairs has said, and I quote them, "We have already made our position on these issues clear, including the fact that our imports are based on market factors and done with the overall objective of ensuring the energy security of 1.4 billion people of India. It is therefore extremely unfortunate that the US should choose to impose additional tariffs on India for actions that several other countries are also taking in their own national interests." And the Ministry of External Affairs has gone on to reiterate that these actions, which are essentially increasing of tariff from 25% earlier to 25% being increased today, are unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable. And India will take all actions that is necessary to protect its national interests. Some piece of breaking news coming in now. And as expected, politics has started over Donald Trump's tariff. Rahul Gandhi, the leader of opposition, has said Trump is trying to bully us. Weakness cannot override citizens. That is what the leader of opposition, Rahul Gandhi, has said in his latest tweet, which he has just put out, in which he has said that Trump is trying to bully India. We'll try and connect with a reporter in just a bit. Of course, this is coming within minutes of the statement that has been issued by the External Affairs Ministry. Rahul Gandhi here saying Trump's 50% tariff is economic blackmail, an attempt to bully India into an unfair trade deal. PM Modi better not let his weakness override the interests of the Indian people. That's what Rahul Gandhi has said. Of course, the opposition has been asking a number of questions with regards to this. Let's first listen in to what Nick Harper has to say with regards to this tariff bomb which has been dropped by US President.
Well, it was threatened and now it's happened. An additional 25% duty placed on India, all because of buying Russian energy. It now means that one of the United States' major allies and one of its major trading partners will have a total duty of 50% placed on goods that are leaving India and entering here, the United States. Already there was that 25% base rate placed on India. That was set last week by the US president. But Donald Trump had also warned that any country buying Russian energy would face an additional penalty. We've known about that for the last couple of weeks, but those threats against India have increased during the course of this week. And now all of it has come to pass with this announcement from the White House. And all of it follows US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's meetings this Wednesday in Moscow with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, the aim of that meeting was to try and achieve a ceasefire in Russia's war in Ukraine. The US president had given Vladimir Putin a deadline of this Friday to achieve a ceasefire. No ceasefire for Russia would have mean Donald Trump imposing a 100% tariff on Russia. But he'd also warned that there would be secondary tariffs or penalties put in place against any country that was buying Russian energy. And remember, India buys both Russian energy and military equipment, both of which have angered Donald Trump. He has said that he has now received, in theory from Steve Witkoff, what he calls additional information. That information being that the government of India is currently directly or indirectly importing Russian Federation oil. Donald Trump says that this additional 25% penalty will come into effect 21 days after the date of this order that has just been published, so 3 weeks from now. Of course, all of this calls into question the nature of the US-India relationship, not just when it comes to trade. The two countries are considered strong allies. They have security partnerships, including the Quad grouping with Japan and Australia, all of that aimed at trying to push back against China's dominance. And remember, Prime Minister Modi was here in Washington just a few months ago, back in February, one of the first leaders to visit the White House when Donald Trump returned to the Oval Office. These latest actions, though, from the US president make it unclear when another sit-down meeting may happen between the two leaders, these tariffs really becoming a barrier to close relations anytime soon. Nick Harper, NDTV, Washington.
Let me bring in the guests who are joining us now. Richard Rosso is Senior Advisor and Chair on India and Emerging Asia Economics at CSIS. Daniel Block is joining me from Washington, D.C. He's Senior Editor Foreign Affairs and a contributing editor at the Washington Monthly. Ambassador Shashank is joining us. He's a former Foreign Secretary. We have David K. Johnson, who is journalist and author. Richard Rosso, how will this 50% tariff affect key Indian export sectors like pharma, the textiles and the gems, and are we staring at a potential job loss crisis?
Yeah, I mean, luckily for India's sake, India is largely a services-driven economy for economic growth and agriculture for employment. So it's always good to remember this is kind of the smallest of the three buckets when you think about where the economy is at, where jobs are at. But the United States is a very meaningful partner as India hopes to start landing some of that global manufacturing that might be shifting away from China. The United States is India's largest export market by far for goods exports. So it's going to have a very real direct impact in the sector that the Modi government wants to see grow. So this is quite real, but we've got a few weeks to try to get this deal across the finish line. We got at least one more round of negotiations within that window. Hopefully they make some progress, but the Russia is a bit of a surprise, I think, in how aggressively the president's pursued that the last couple of days.
What really explains this kind of agitation which is being displayed by President Trump here, John? India, in its response, has been very measured. The response is coming in from the Minister of External Affairs. And today, again, after this increase in tariff to 50%, we are seeing India say that we are doing it in the national interest, just as many countries have done so. Why is Donald Trump so agitated, particularly with India? John? All right. That's a question to David K. Johnston. Apologies.
Thank you. Well, first of all, understand that under the American Constitution, Donald Trump can't impose tariffs. Congress can impose tariffs. There's a very small, limited exception. So all of this is based on Donald's claim of a power he doesn't have and which is being litigated. Secondly, Donald doesn't know anything. And what you're seeing here, as I've been reporting on him for almost 40 years, is that he has no knowledge of the world. He doesn't understand things. And he is flailing around trying to figure out what to do because he's made promises and threats, none of which he's been able to carry out. So frankly, I wouldn't be particularly worried about this because Donald Trump doesn't have authority to impose tariffs. The American Constitution is very clear about that. That is a power only held by Congress.
Okay, so if Donald Trump doesn't have the power, then what exactly is he indulging in with these constant tweets? Is it bluster?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. This is his whole career as a con artist, as a quote-unquote businessman who lost money left and right. Donald Trump's whole career has been based on bullying people, having some leverage over people for various reasons, all of which I've documented in my best-selling books. And Donald believes that he is all-powerful. He has said, I have an Article 2, that's the presidential section of the American economy, of the American Constitution. I have an Article 2 that says I can do anything I want. It doesn't say anything close to that, but Donald believes he has dictatorial powers. And I'm shocked that everybody is acting as if he does.
Okay. And that brings me to the question that was asked today, Daniel, to Donald Trump with regards to US imports from Russia. He says, I don't know anything about it. He certainly doesn't know what is the nature of import coming in, or is it his way of avoiding a question which has been repeatedly asked by India, that you yourself import uranium fertilizers from Russia?
So I'd say with Donald Trump, you can never rule out the possibility that he doesn't know something that he should know the answer to. We've seen that again and again with this president. If I had to bet, though, I would guess it's what you said, that he's trying to avoid a question that he does know the answer to and doesn't want to answer. He does that all the time when he's asked about uncomfortable or difficult subjects. And this makes him, like many politicians, often when they're asked a question they don't want to respond to, they'll say, oh, I don't know, or I haven't heard anything about that. But he takes it really to a new extreme in that he simply won't respond to difficult questions. And it's one that, in some ways, I would expect the president to have an answer to in this case. But again, it's Trump, so no surprises there that he's not handling that question in a way that you would expect the U.S. president to.
Okay, then Ambassador Shashank, just minutes ago, the response came in from the External Affairs Ministry. Of course, as I said, there is a great degree of, caution here. India saying that these actions are unfair, unreasonable, and unjustified. India has long defended its oil imports from Russia on economic grounds. Is that narrative now no longer acceptable to Washington, D.C. and the Trump administration?
Well, it seems that the United States wants India to stop buying oil from Russia and perhaps start buying oil from United States or from the Western countries or from other suppliers. India is going for the oil which is available, which is under the international sanctions regimes, and Russia has also been working on that basis. So therefore, I feel that so far India has not violated any of the sanctions, etc., which have been imposed by the West, even though one can say that, well, these are not imposed by the United Nations, but by the individual set of countries. Secondly, India has tried again and again to talk to Russia and to Ukraine how to bring about an end to their conflict. So it's not that India has not tried that. So it is both linked. That is, buying oil for its 1.4 billion people. Secondly, trying to bring an end to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And thirdly, in order to keep the oil markets stable in the world, India has also been supplying the processed oil products to European Union and others, those who are interested. But anyway, if they are not interested now and President Trump feels that India is making money out of it, And I do not know how the Indians are passing on that money to the Russians, because that is, they are saying they are funding the Russian war with Ukraine. So I don't understand that. But then India will have to find other markets, whether within India or elsewhere. So I think this will go on because Russia is supplying the oil at the prices which are reasonable for them. And perhaps there will be pressure from the Indian exporters to somehow get support from the Indian government so that they don't lose out the whole market because of 50% tariffs in the US. So it's likely that Indians might also talk to the Russians that to make some concessions on the oil prices so that part of the subsidies or part of the concessions can be extended to the Indian exporters, those who are hit very hard. But India will also have to look for alternative markets. I have no doubt about it. Our exporters will have to look for that. And President Trump is making it much easier in a way, which is not good because we have tried for last 20 years to improve our relations, to set up a strategic partnership with the United States. But somehow, recently, in the last 1 month or so, after Pakistan was able to get into the good books of the United States, apparently they have become informal advisors to President Trump how to deal with India. Okay. And I think that is what is happening. And India, of course, I mean, we are talking to the other suppliers, other people with whom we can have supply chain relationships. So the East Asian countries, Northeast Asian countries, maybe even China, Russia, Africa, and elsewhere. So we'll have to see how best we can take care of them. But we must continue our dialogue with the Americans because as we find that other colleagues are saying, that we have to find a proper bilateral trade arrangement which is acceptable to both sides and which is also according to the Indian Constitution and the American Constitution.
Okay. David, since you pointed out that very interesting aspect that the US president has no powers, it's the Congress which has the powers in the case of trade deals, then what really happens to the talks that are ongoing?
Well, a lot of companies are, in fact, the importing countries, paying these tariffs, but then they're filing to get the money back. And the smartest move for the Indian government, and I'm sure it will do this, Maria, is to go and litigate this, to go and say, you don't have any authority to do this. And in relation to the what's motivating this by Trump, let's remember that India has been a big beneficiary of Russia having to sell oil to India at about 20% below the world price because of sanctions. Trump is trying to figure out what to do in Ukraine, and India is now being drawn into this. Remember, Trump promised that in one day he would end the war in Ukraine, and it's been 9 months since the election, and he's gotten nowhere because he has no idea what he's doing.
Okay, then, Richard Rosso, how should India balance its strategic autonomy with maintaining a stable partnership with the US? Or do you think that question doesn't arise anymore, given how Donald Trump's stand has been? He has only taken a maximalist position now.
Well, look, I think we still luckily have a pretty good reservoir of goodwill. Times like this that the United States could have taken a different course in engagement with India, are very different approaches after Russia invaded Ukraine and basically giving India a pass at that time. The murder for hire came out and the United States didn't make an astonishingly big deal about it or anything. So we have a reservoir of goodwill. I think we can survive this, but I think for India, it's going to be kind of a dual track approach, right? Try to get this deal done because the United States is too important of an economic partner for India's exporters to let this die, but also realizing India's got political bright lines and agriculture market access that the President of the United States does not understand. So hopefully getting the deal done. But at the second track, as India's been doing very successfully in recent years, is building stronger economic ties with other very important partners. India's been signing robust trade agreements. The recent visit of the head of the Philippines, initiated a whole number of important announcements. So try to get as much as they can out of the U.S. relationship because it's too important, but also I think further deepening ties with other critical partners. It's a good dual track approach and one that I think is pretty pragmatic.
What about the Russian energy strategy? Do you think that this will push India to rethink that Russian energy strategy or double down on it as a matter of principle and economic compulsion?
Yeah, we've seen U.S. pressure on India on oil purchases and Iran and Venezuela yield, I think, the kind of outcomes we wanted. The question is this really a policy proclamation by the president, or is it a negotiating plug for a couple of narrow objectives we have on the trade agreement, or for the U.S. to swap out our own hydrocarbons? I think you look back 4 or 5 months ago, and the president's view was Ukraine started the conflict. So I think for India to dodge every single time the administration policy and how we look at the conflict changes, if suddenly Russia opens up and is looking at an agreement with Ukraine, a ceasefire of something, it could change again dramatically. So careful not to jump at the short-term things, because I don't know yet that we consider this to be President Trump's core policy.
Okay, so let me bring in Daniel now. Daniel, a thought on, should India adopt the strategy that it has done so far, waiting and watching, and at the same time very patiently reiterating that this is unreasonable? Or should India also hit back with some kind of counter tariffs?
I'm not sure how much it matters one way or the other. And I say that because we've seen other countries attempt both when it comes to dealing with Trump and tariffs. We've seen countries hit back and try and be aggressive and strike a deal. And we've seen countries that kind of sit back patiently and don't do anything and don't retaliate. And, I'd say on balance, I think the countries that have not hit back have probably wound up getting better deals than the ones that have struck back aggressively. But again, neither is a sure way to save yourself from Trump's tariffs. We're talking about a president who, to some extent just really loves tariffs. He once said that it's his favorite word in the dictionary. He has a kind of fetishization of tariffs. So I'm not sure that there's a clear playbook or right way for India to handle this if its goal is to get the tariffs off. Like I said, I think on balance, states that have not struck back have been more successful at striking trade deals with Trump. But there's no guaranteed way to succeed when it comes to getting tariffs off your country if you're negotiating with Donald Trump.
Okay, David, because you'll be exiting the show any moment now, so let me ask you the last question. Has India's foreign policy, particularly in energy diplomacy, made it vulnerable to global backlash?
Well, India's economy is growing, driven by several things. I mean, it's growing quickly in the pharmaceutical industry, where there's a huge future, not only now, but with what's coming with new research in manufacturing biosimilars and other advances. And it's benefited greatly from this deeply discounted Russian oil that's helped build its economy. If you're going to be a world power, and India wants to go back to 500 years ago when it, along with China, were the richest countries in the world, yes, it's going to be vulnerable. And the advantage India has is a highly educated group of diplomats and trade negotiators who know what they're doing, with a prime minister, whether you like or dislike his policies, who's an educated, thoughtful person against someone who doesn't literally know anything, Donald Trump, and who has a mercantilist view of the world. He wants to go back to the economy of when the British East India Company ruled India. That's his whole view of the world. If you have $1 or a piece of gold and I don't have it, the only way to get it is to attack you in some way, not to grow the economy, because Donald doesn't know anything about economics despite a degree in that field.
Ambassador Shashank, India so far had maintained that strategic balance between US and Russia. Would you say that in the new world order and a precedent in Donald Trump in charge of the White House, India will be forced to choose between the two countries?
I think it's too early to come to that conclusion. India has been working with both Republican and Democratic administrations to improve strategic relationships, technical tie-ups in critical energies, critical technologies, new areas, and we have been moving ahead on that. Only thing is that, yes, perhaps not as fast. What President Trump is trying to do is to bring India directly into the American area of influence. So it would India to become like Japan or Australia or something like this, so that they must listen to what the Americans would say. But I think, we have come very far from where we were at the non-aligned movement, strategic autonomy, when Americans were saying that we were closer to the Russians, buying almost 80-90% of our armaments, defense equipment from the Russians. It is coming down, and they have been showing a lot of understanding that it is a legacy kind of issue which has to continue, and then gradually America and Indian partnership can become of extreme importance for both of them. It can be a defining partnership for this century, as some of the experts have been saying from the American side. But I think President Trump has priority for setting the balance of trade right for the Americans. And he feels that the only way to do it is by raising the tariffs. So we have to ride out this storm and then see how best we can create a better relationship so that it is rewarding for both sides. India does not want a one-way relationship in order to get somehow concessions from the American side and not give it back to them. It must be a mutually beneficial relationship. So I think we'll have to continue working on that so that it is seen in good faith. We are working together, but at the same time, we would like it to be a peaceful world. Russia has been an old trusted friend. We don't want Russia to go under the, let's say, the overriding power of the Chinese, who have been able to now become one of the most important countries in the world. And they openly declared that in the next 20 years or so, they will become number one scientific, technical, and military power in the world. So I think Americans have come to realize perhaps that that will be a bit too late for them. So they must move very quickly to see how best they can get Russia to obey their commands, India to obey their commands. So I don't know whether it's going to take place that way or not, because Indians so far we were growing at 2 or 3% every year. So it's much easier to say that, all right, I mean, we must abide by whatever others are saying because we really cannot grow that fast. But now suddenly the IMF is saying that no, India is going to be one of the biggest economies in the next 3 or 4 years. It will become number 3rd economy, and then over a longer term period, a much stronger economy. So I think that perhaps doesn't suit everybody. India also finding it very, very new kind of a situation. So we ourselves also must come to realize that, well, we have a good brain power in the country, which we are sharing with everyone, because India's policy has always been, the more you share, the more you gain. If you see that with the patents, etc., also the Indians have been sharing whatever the information they have. So I think this is a new kind of situation. Many Americans would like very much what India does. They may not like what China does, what Russia does. So therefore, that is the other issue, that President Trump finds that here is a country which is very much like in the image of the United States. And still it's moving so fast, where the Americans are not doing that well. So I think President Trump wants quick results. India would not mind giving them good results, but it should be mutually beneficial and not work against the strategic interests of the country.
Okay. Richard Rosso, what is visible right now is that the tensions between the two countries are at a level which needs some kind of dialing down. How do you think the temperature will go down, and who should make that effort? It should come from the US President himself, because he has been taking to Truth Social every day announcing these punitive action.
Yeah. Last time we had a crisis, I would say, of this magnitude in 2013. It was really only resolved by the fact that India had an election and we chose to engage Prime Minister Modi, which he'd been kind of held out, and we estranged for quite some period of time. And we don't have a moment quite like that when you can have that ability to trigger a dramatic reset. I think if we get a trade agreement done in the next couple of weeks, and you can at least remove that top line 25% or bring it down, I think that also reduces the pressure India's faced directly on the Russia issue. Because again, I think that's more of a tactic than a dramatic policy shift by the Biden administration. So I think it is reparable in the near term. But right now, it just feels like the United States is pushing this off the edge of a cliff for whatever reason. India's got dramatic bright lines on what they can offer in the trade agreement. And the fact that the United States has gotten rid of almost all of our senior India policy leaders across the US government, there's nobody at a senior level to tell President Trump that the agriculture tariff issue is real. These are livelihoods. These are people living on the edge that can't get their ag products to the United States. Nobody I think is able to whisper in his ear and give him the confidence that India is not using this as a bluff. It's very real. So there is a pathway where I think we could repair things. But right now, the United States is driving us off the cliff as fast as we can.
This new measure will come into effect in 21 days' time. The Indian team is in United States. They will be, for talks. What really is the purpose of this talk then, if it is Donald Trump who's deciding unilaterally?
Well, I think India might be able to put some other sweeteners on the table that the U.S. trade negotiators think would excite the U.S. side. Promising certain levels of investment in the United States by Indian companies, or again, acquisition of American petroleum or maybe defense. These are things that the government controls, maybe even some broad numbers of investment promises in both directions. Maybe there's some other things beyond the undoable things on agriculture and dairy that they could put on the table that would excite folks enough to get a deal back in front of the president. But otherwise, we're going to be circling the drain for a long time, because what's left in terms of what they've been trying to negotiate so far is politically impossible in India. And I just think the United States, the White House, if we're going to get a deal, they've really got to digest and understand that.
All right, Richard Rosso, David, Ambassador Shashank, and Daniel Block, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us.